They clapped like an audience at a cheap play, polite, loud, delighted by the spectacle of my exclusion. The invitations had been edited. My name scratched out from the family group chat. Holiday photos reshuffled to make me look like a ghost who'd never existed. They told their friends the story as if it were a parable. How I'd failed, how I'd embarrassed them, how the sensible thing was to cut off what made the house messy. For a while I pretended to be unaffected. I let the messages roll over me like rain on glass. But rain reveals things. Footprints, mud, the slow erosion of what someone thinks they own. While they celebrated their neat new family, I watched and learned how fragile their tidy life really was. I was not the kind of person who burned bridges with fireworks. My revenge would be quieter, more inevitable, like water finding a crack and widening it until stone gives. I found work where I could be useful in ways they had stopped seeing. I took a job at the small company that printed the family's holiday cards. I answered calls at the restaurant that often catered their parties. I learned the names of the suppliers who brought flowers to their gatherings, the accountant who managed their little trusts, the neighbor who walked their dog when they were too busy. Not by accident, by design. They had believed they could erase me and nothing would change. They'd forgotten that families are networks of small dependencies. And the person you cast out can be the one who knows how all the small machines are wound and wound again. At first it was voyeurism disguised as necessity. I would pack leftovers the caterer missed, and in the quiet of my rented car I would smile at the pattern of their lives. A static of obligations, a rhythm of diurnal comforts. Slowly, methodically, I began to place myself where they needed me without them recognizing the dependency forming. I repaired the heater their contractor kept promising to fix but never did. I arranged for a florist, my florist, to deliver the arrangements for the anniversary they'd braced for without me. When their youngest sprained an ankle at a birthday party, it was my number the nanny found taped in the first aid kit labeled, "Emergency Contacts." Convenient accidents, I called them. They were not cruel. They were practical. I did not want malice to be obvious. I wanted usefulness to be inevitable. The season of their triumphs rolled on. Thanksgiving arrived, then the silly winter tinsel of New Year's. They paraded photos of their new, improved family across social media and tagged each other in the chorus of approval. I watched from the edges, the same edges where they'd set me down. And when a crisis sprouted, like mold in a forgotten corner, I was the first to taste it. Their family business, an old hardware store that had survived 3 generations of my relatives, fell into a hole made by complacency. The new manager they'd hired, shiny and promising, signed contracts with suppliers who sold goodies on credit, and vanished when the invoices matured. The bank called. The shelves emptied. The proud elders paced like caged birds. I could have gorged on their panic. I could have pointed and laughed as the old men fingered the ledger in bewilderment. Instead I walked into the store with my sleeves rolled up, and an offer no huffy sibling could refuse. Let me run the place for a season. The terms were humble. No title, no press release, just a promise that if I could find cash flow, they could keep the store and their reputations. The patriarch, who had been the architect of my exile, sniffed and said nothing. Pride, after all, is a currency with strict exchange rates. He needed his shop more than he needed to be right. I knew the rhythms of the inventory, the accounts, the quiet corners where money bled like slow leaks. I renegotiated with suppliers who remembered my grandmother's face, and trusted the steady hand whose name no one used at dinner anymore. I replaced the manager with someone competent and discreet. I reached out to the local contractors who liked doing business with someone who paid on time. Little by little the shelves refilled. Customers came back because word of mouth moves faster than cruelty. The store regained its glow like a lamp polished clean. The patriarch thanked me with a stiff handshake and a muttered, "Good work." He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't have to. The repair was its own apology. It was not only commerce where I planted myself. When the eldest aunt fell ill, it was my messages that coordinated doctors, my silent visits that reorganized medication schedules, my patience that held the meetings with insurance reps. They called me in, reluctantly at first, their faces a study in complicated gullibility. "We can manage," they would say, and then admit, only under their breath, that they couldn't. They had cut me out of their family photos but not out of the mechanics that made a family function. I watched their dependency unspool into admission one awkward evening at the store. The patriarch came in with his cane, shoulders hunched not from age but from the weight of having to ask. He looked at me like a man who'd swallowed a truth he couldn't spit out. "We need you," he said, clumsy with the sentence as if it had teeth. Around him, his children shifted like sinners. There was no malice in their eyes now, only the bashful, embarrassed recognition of their smallness. It did not yield the thrill of revenge some might expect. Instead, it offered a fragile thing, leverage wrapped in the possibility of restoration. I could have stood on the counter and spelled out every slight they'd thrown my way. I could have catalogued the birthday cakes I'd baked alone, or the times their laughter had had a place at my table only until their new alliances arrived. But I had learned that true power is not humiliation, it is inevitability. I let the store hum and the ants' prescriptions be filled and the contractor's teeth be paid. I let them discover that the world they designed without me had gaps that needed filling, and that filling them required someone who knew the place like a map. When the season turned, their faces softened in ways that pride had kept carved out. Invitations began to trickle back, awkward, tentative, phrased like negotiations. "We'd like you to come by," one read, as if family was now something to be procured, not assumed. I read the messages, set the phone down, and thought about all the ways I'd been necessary. Revenge, I discovered, is not always about spectacle. Sometimes it is an economy. You reclaim what they thought they could discard by becoming the only person who can make their life run again.